On the other hand, if I read the scriptures well, there are so many things there which seem to be a reality. I'm dealing with archaeology, I'm dealing with material culture. Solomon built an official compound made up of the king's palace, the construction of which took 13 years. There was the house of the forest of Lebanon, the house of Pharaoh's daughters, there was the great court, there was the other court, there was the house of the Lord. All that becomes alive when we sift through the material originating in the Temple Mount. We have abundance of pottery. We have a plethora of other finds from First Temple period. The period cannot be denied. Again, I was not an eyewitness. I didn't meet them personally, but meeting the material culture of their time and meeting the texts, I have the feeling as if I shook their hands. Temple Mount is the soul, heart, and spirit of the Jewish people. That is the place of traditionally the binding of Isaac by Abraham. That is the place purchased by David from the last Jebusite ruler of Jerusalem, Araunah. That is the place where David's son Solomon built the house of the Lord. And until this very day, all synagogues all around the world are directed towards the Temple Mount of Jerusalem. It is also the #1 archaeological site in this country, and maybe in the world. Nevertheless, was not exposed to the spade of an archaeologist ever. So Jerusalem, which is one of the most excavated places upon earth, has a black hole. Altogether, in these 14 years of sifting, we have had over 500,000 finds. The vast majority of it is, of course, pottery, but pottery is datable. We have only, again, small finds. Those include jewelry, they include artifacts of ancient warfare, they include dice and playing pieces, they include coins in abundance. About 9% of the dated finds that we have are from First Temple period.
Amazing.
Our general work does not try to prove anything or to disprove anything. We are interested in whatever is found. We are interested in the facts and the conclusions that we can draw from the facts.
The difference in this project is nothing is situ. It's all been tumbled together.
That is correct, and that is the challenge.
Yeah.
The sifting project is the closest that we can get to a controlled archaeological excavation in Temple Mount.
What's the most unique thing that stands out to you that you've found so far there?
The people. It is amazing. Children, elderly, students, religious, non-religious, ultra-religious, all kinds and types of people. And we have had people from all 4 corners of the world. We have had an incredible number of volunteers. They were about 250,000 people, which makes this project into the most exposed archaeological project in the world. To look into the eyes of a child who finds a coin which was not touched by somebody for 2,000 years, or to look into the eyes of an elderly person who realizes that he touches the sacred soil of the Temple Mount, and the excitement of these people, that is unparalleled. So the greatest discovery of mine was the people.
We're not able to go back and uncover Solomon's temple, and who knows if or when we'll be able to actually do any official archaeological work on the Temple Mount. But from that discarded dirt, the Temple Mount Sifting Project has been able to produce and discover some pretty impressive things. He was able to show us several pieces that dated back to David's time in the United Kingdom. No one would have wanted what happened in 1999 to have happened. No one would have wanted that to have been disturbed. But it provided you an opportunity to find things like this. And after doing that for 14 years, what conclusions have you reached about what you have found and how it connects to the Davidic United Monarchy?
Listen, I cannot prove through the finds anything. I cannot prove that there was a David, but we have indirect circumstantial evidence there was much activity at that time. I'll tell you more than that. 5 years after the death of Solomon, in the days of Rehoboam, the country was attacked by Shishak, king of Egypt. Now, why would Shishak attack that place if it was a small village? That attack is documented in Egyptian sources. It would be impossible to assume that 5 years after Solomon, the Bible is historically correct, and 5 years earlier, all of it is fantasy, and all of that is fiction. That is beyond my logic.
There's another quote from an archaeologist, and I thought it was interesting, that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I never ever draw any conclusion from absence of material. If you draw conclusions from the absence of material, you can come to the conclusion that the ancient cavemen spoke on radio telephone because we didn't find the wires. That's anti-logical.
Dr. Barkai, it has been an honor to be with you. Thank you for sharing your office and your knowledge with us today.
The privilege is mine.
Dr. Barkai is just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, we could have spent days with him and still not exhausted his knowledge on the topics of archaeology in Israel. Having him explain the significance of what they've found and what it attests to was especially moving. I wish everybody who's trying to answer the question, was there really a Saul, David, and Solomon? I wish all of them could be in those labs. I wish all of them could see those artifacts be brought out. I wish all of them could meet the archaeologists that pulled them out of the ground. They're there, and they're real. I think to ignore them is going to hinder anybody's honest search about the reality of the United Kingdom.
One of the things that came out of that period of time was literature and songs, music. Well, that brings us here to Qumran. Qumran sits on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea. You can see the Dead Sea spread out here before us. But behind us is the caves of Qumran. You can see a couple of the caves here. There are more caves around the corner and throughout these hills. In 1946, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled into one of these caves and found a number of scrolls. They began to inspect them and they realized that there were scriptures written on them. They found portions of copies of every single book except for Esther. The scrolls actually went through a number of different hands, but today, if you want to, you can actually go and see them at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. They have dated a number of these scrolls to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century BC. And so in particular, if you think about the time of the United Kingdom, these are copies of the originals that were only placed 700 or 800 years after the originals were written.
How many Old Testament manuscripts do we have?
We don't know the exact number, but they're in the thousands. And some of them are very small, but they can use those to piece together a much larger document. There are some books, though, for instance, the Isaiah scroll, in which we have an entire copy of that book available to us. For a number of authors that we appreciate, like Plato and Aristotle, we have less than a dozen copies. However, when it comes to the Hebrew Bible, we have thousands of copies of manuscripts. And because of that, we can have an even greater confidence that what we read today when we open up our Bible is accurate to the original writings.
And you think about what that should do for people. I mean, most historians don't question the authenticity of these other ancient works when they have less than a dozen copies, but it comes down to the Bible or the ancient Hebrew or even the ancient Greek text, and we have thousands, if not tens of thousands of copies. That should reinforce or bolster anybody's faith when they come to realize that. Qumran isn't a place that you would automatically think about David or Solomon or the United Monarchy, but we're told in the Bible Solomon wrote 3,000 Proverbs, 1,001 Psalms. To go back to what does the text say, you need to have a reliable text. It's like building a house. You need to have an accurate blueprint. We can trust what we have. It's accurate, and it's accurate so many times over. And I think that's huge, especially for those of us in the West, especially for young people, college students, high school students, who in the West are being told, no, that's not a historical document, that's just a legendary document, or that's just a cultural document. The details are too specific just to be a cultural document. We find evidence in the archaeological record that fit what's in that document. We have so many copies from independent places around the globe that match. If you came to that question, can we trust the accuracy of the Bible? With an open mind, without bias, and just looked at it fairly, that you walk away with the conclusion, I can trust what that says.
These texts were written by the Essenes. Essenes were a Jewish sect, and they lived here at Qumran. And they had particular rooms in which they wrote a number of these documents that were later stored here in the caves. You see the different rooms?
So this was someone's house.
Yeah.
It'd be such a stark contrast from one side to the other to be able to see the Judean hills over here, but then the Dead Sea over here.
Water is vital for their survival down here. As they collected the rainwater, it would come down this little trough and fall into this little bitty pool. Once the pool filled up, it would spill over into this larger cistern. In doing so, it leaves the sediment that was in the water in this smaller pool, so that the water in the cistern was perfectly clean.
So it was an ancient filtration system.
Exactly.
I think it would surprise people to see how many ritual baths and all of the water that would have required.
And they would go through ritual cleansing multiple times per day. And so the need for good, clean water was important to them. This could be used as a community room. You can see the seating all the way around here.
What this is explaining over here is this would have been for studying, and that they found a lot of oil lamps for light in this room.
The oil lamps could be easily set up here on these rocks to light the entire room here.
Why did the Essenes find such value in preserving these texts?
Well, I think they found value for the same reasons that we find value. You look at the Song of Solomon, it's a song about the love that he has for a woman. You look at the Proverbs. How often do I open up the Proverbs if I'm having some problem in life? I can find something there that I can use today.
Even Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, the preacher, where he's answering this question of, is life meaningless or not? And he's answering, with God in view, it's not. And without God in the picture, it really feels like it's meaningless.
And of course, then we can look at the Psalms, and we use those same Psalms today in our praise to God.
A lot of people have the misconception that the Bible is very flat. But with this poetic literature, God is trying to evoke emotions. He's trying to get an emotional response to truth. The books that we're talking about, that David and Solomon contributed to, are rich, and God included that kind of text, and it was preserved. And those types of writings accomplished that. The people who lived during the reign of Saul, David, and Solomon, they're looking for a ruler. They knew that even from back in the days of Joseph, from Genesis, God had promised a ruler that was going to come from the tribe of Judah. All of these centuries, they've been looking for the Lord's anointed. And that's one of the reasons they got so excited when Saul was finally anointed, why they celebrated David, this man after God's own heart, who was by far an improvement over Saul, and the continuation of his kingship through Solomon and hopefully down through the line. To be on this side of history, we recognize that all of those prophecies were pointing to the true king, God's son, from the tribe of Judah, this man who took on flesh. That was part of what the people thought they saw in Jesus. They had a misconception about his kingdom. They didn't understand that it was a spiritual kingdom, but they recognized there's a king here. That's what they celebrated during the triumphal entry. It's what Pilate asked him about. Are you really the king of the Jews? It's the accusation that went above his cross. And so we recognize that Jesus is the prophesied king. We've been looking for evidences of the united kingdom, but all of the men from that united kingdom just foreshadowed the true king, Jesus. Having Barry bring me here has been so helpful to think about what's the most accurate, best way to answer that question. Is the united monarchy something that has historical roots, or is it simply a myth or a legend? And I think coming here and seeing these places and speaking with these experts, hearing their experience, it helps increase my faith and trust in the biblical record. There's a quote from a book that's currently out of print where the author is trying to help his unbelieving friend wrestle with faith. and I think it just sums up this entire trip. What he writes is, faith is a venture based on evidence. Evidence adequate enough to justify the decision to leap. Evidence adequate enough to create hope in the success of leaping. I would say that my job as an apologist is to encourage responsible leaping. I try to show that the leap is not hopeless, that you can reach the other side, that many have done it before you, that the dangers below aren't as great as you think. Beyond this, however, the apologist can't go. I present the evidence. You must decide to leap. We have all of this evidence, and there's no final proof that is going to convince everybody. At the end of the day, each of us has to make a decision based on the evidence. Is that adequate enough to justify the decision to place my faith in what the text says? And at the conclusion of all of this, personally, the answer is yes. And I hope that whoever's taken this journey with us would reach the same conclusion.
After ruling for 7 years in Hebron, David decided to move his capital to the city of Jerusalem. The problem was that the Jebusites were here, and so he needed a way to enter the city and capture it. He issued a challenge to his men, and he challenged them to go up the water shaft. The word in Hebrew is sinor. Sometimes it's translated as pipe, because he knew that would be an entrance into the city, and if they could get someone in there, then maybe they have a chance of capturing the city. Joab volunteered for that and was able to successfully get in. For a long time, we didn't understand exactly what that meant in the Bible. But in 1867, a British explorer by the name of Charles Warren came to this land looking for different biblical archaeological sites. And he found this shaft. And he actually climbed up this shaft and discovered this whole tunnel system under here. And he proposed that this was probably the way that the citizens of the Jebusite city came to retrieve their water. And so he proposed that this is the pipe, the water shaft, the sinor that is mentioned in Scripture.
How do we know that this could be that shaft?
This may not have been the exact way that the people retrieved their water at the time, but this is the way Charles Warren came up. There are one or two other shafts in this area that Joab could have come up, but it would have been something very similar to this that would have given him access inside the city.
So it still fits the story, whether it was this shaft or another shaft. There was something just like this that Joab would have come up to help capture the Jebusite city.
That's right.
Why would David ask Joab, or one of his men, to come up a water shaft in order to help capture a city?
Well, the city of Jerusalem, the ancient Jebusite city, sat on a little peninsula of land that was surrounded by the Kidron, Hinnom, and Central valleys. So it was very defensible. It was very hard to attack the city. I think that's one of the reasons why David wanted the city. There was going to have to be something secret to happen. And as you can see, it wouldn't be very easy to get here. Only one man could come up here. You couldn't pull a whole army. And so probably Joab came up a shaft like this, then was able to open the door and allow the army in.
So it was a very defensible position. Some people have described this spot as the true foundation for the nation of Israel and for the city of Jerusalem itself. You know, most people look at the Temple Mount and they think, that's Jerusalem. Well, it became that, especially during the days of King Herod. But when you come back to the United Kingdom, Saul did a little bit, but David really coalesced the nation around him. It's incredible. It sends chills down your spine to think about. This marks the beginning of that.
And it all started with Joab coming up a shaft like this and capturing the city.
I don't think you can overstate the importance of going down to Warren Shaft, or even the discovery of it. There are so many battles and so many cities that are conquered in Canaan by the Israelites. but to have one that's so uniquely conquered, where you climb up through a water shaft, archaeology plays such an important role in helping us understand how legitimate the biblical text is and how accurate the biblical text is. In this spot, from the Gihon Spring, there was water that the city accessed through these tunnels. To have that detail and then to have a place like that found that fits the description, it was just invaluable. Going underground and exploring the shaft that Warren found, and thinking about Joab going up and helping David conquer the city, I think about going back to our conversation with Scott and thinking about the development of weaponry. In 1 Samuel, the text specifies that the Philistines kept the Israelites from working with metals, that there was no blacksmith in Israel. And if they even wanted to sharpen their farm implements, they had to go to the Philistines to get that done. That makes sense with the rest of what we read in 1 Samuel, where it really emphasizes the weapons that Goliath uses, or the shortage of weaponry. At one point, only Saul and Jonathan are the ones with weapons. You can see the development of arrow tips, spearheads, things that are coming out of that layer of archaeology. Scott put forward the possibility that during David's time where he was hiding out with the Philistines, he actually figured out or discovered that technology and brought it with him. And you start to see that become more prolific during the time of the United Kingdom. Is there extra biblical evidence for the existence of David and his kingdom? Evidence outside of the biblical text?
Well, honestly, there's not a lot. However, in 1993 and 94, a couple of archaeologists who were digging at the Tel Dan found 3 pieces of stone that when they put it together, it seems to have been written by King Hazael from Aram. And he's describing a battle in which he has defeated the kings of Israel and Judah. However, he doesn't refer to Judah as Judah. He refers to it as the house of David.
Now, when do they date this?
About 150 to 200 years after King David lived.
So the value of this is that there's a foreign king who has defeated the southern kingdom of Judah centuries after David actually lived, but he still refers to the kingdom as the house of David. That would be evidence that David was more than just a city leader or a tribal leader, that he had authority over a much larger area.
From his vantage point, he sees the whole kingdom of Judah as being David's family.
And he has no reason to try to substantiate whether David existed or not.
Right.
He's just stating what he knows to be true.
That's exactly
That
right.
that kingdom was referred to by the house of David.
I think it'd be beneficial for us to return to the city of David. Just within the last couple of decades, they've done some great archaeological work there, and they think they've uncovered part of King David's palace.
The current modern Jerusalem just sprawls all over these hills, across these valleys. Most people, when they enter the city, they have this picture of this bird's eye view from the Mount of Olives looking down, and you see the Temple Mount. But that wasn't there in the city of David. You're talking less than 3,000 people. And so really with the city of David, you have this seed of Israel starting as a nation and growing out from its capital.
We are in the city of David, the true location of the ancient biblical Jerusalem. And you can see around us the tourists coming, just exploring again this
Active place. It's a very active
Absolutely.
place.
We are standing in the palace area. Up to 150 years ago, we didn't know where the city was. Everybody thought that the ancient biblical Jerusalem lies in the confines of the old city. It's only when Charles Warren, by accident, came and he discovered the place that he realized, well, listen, this is the actual location of the ancient city.
Archaeologically, how do you establish that this was the palace? How do we know that?
we cannot say 100% that this is the palace. This is how archaeology works. Unless you find something that is written, David was here,
Right.
you cannot say that.
Right.
Eilat Mazar, she came and she said to us, guys, I think that this is the location of the palace of King David, and we need to dig down. And we said to her, but we did dig down. She said, you didn't dig deep enough. And we said to her, okay, we are willing to go, but you have to tell us why. And she said to us, 60 years ago, a woman named Kathleen Kenyon found a capital broken into in a landslide, and that capital is a Phoenician style. And Phoenicia is the modern day Lebanon. It dates back 3,000 years. And when I opened my Bible, she said, I read about a king, Hiram of Tyre, and he came and he helped David to build his house, Solomon to build his house, and to ultimately to build the house of God. The second thing is we found houses built into the walls of the ancient city dating back to the first temple period. And that means that we are very close to some kind of citadel here. Within those houses we found furniture, and that furniture dates back 3,000 years. The third reason is the city itself lies between two valleys. We have the Kidron Valley, you guys can see it on that side, and at the back of me another. Between these valleys we have the city situated. Very difficult to take the city. So difficult that the Jebusite king said, not going to happen. Eilat Mazar, she said, on the north side, it is level. It means that you're going to have to put something here to keep the city safe.
She came with her Bible in hand and kept reading it and referring to it and looking for reference points and kept finding those reference points as she dug.
I think that's very important. If you want to find the Bible, what's written in the Bible, you have to go to the
That's
Bible,
right.
right?
Well, I'm very grateful for her approach.
So are we.
Very grateful.
What's going on currently around this site?
Full-time excavations going on all the time. And we started a project with the name Jerusalem Watch, and through that people can actually support the excavation team. You can become part of getting the buckets on the ground so that we can absolutely expose the complete blueprint of the city through walls. So we have a big building, right? How do we say that it's the palace? In 2005, we found a very important seal. 3 years later, we also found another seal, and these two seals are very, very important. Two seals that appears in the same book in the Bible, Jeremiah, in the same chapter, in the same verse, back to each other. Gedaliah ben Pashur, Yuchal ben Shelemiah. Written in the Bible, written on the seals. So that tells us that we are in the governmental area of that time. The time of King David dates back 3,000 years. The time of these guys, 2,800 years. And we know that in that time, this was the governmental seat of the city itself.
How does it make you feel to stand in a place like this where such an important point in Israel's history happens?
This city brings the Bible to like 360 degrees. The city of David, Jerusalem itself, leads in the fact that there is unequivocal proof that there is a connection to the Bible. In front of us we can see a wall. It's this wall that led us to find the place here. And we can get a better vantage point of the palace area if we go to that side.
When you see the size of the walls, you can imagine how difficult that must have been for people to try to come and capture the city. And you understand why David would have sent Joab up through the water shaft to get inside.
Correct. If you go down, this even goes down more to the Kidron Valley over there. And that's why the city was so difficult to take.
The city of David is such a great location strategically. You have the military fortifications. He's up high, he's surrounded by mountains. And when you talk about Iron Age cities, they're developing the fortifications, they're developing the fortified cities. You're getting more cities with walls. They're becoming less and less nomadic as a people.
You can see a house built into the wall itself. These houses that we found date back to the first temple period. This house belonged to Achiel. We know that because it was written in pottery that we found. This man, Achiel, was a very important person in the government as well. Firstly, his house is very close to the palace. Secondly, you can see his garage where he parked his donkeys. You can see 2 pillars over there with holes inside the pillars, and that's where he fastened the donkeys. But more than that, we found an ancient toilet. And for people like me in those days, you had to run a little bit further than your house to do certain things. Achiel had
You have the luxury.
He had the luxury of that inside his house. seeing houses built into the wall itself, we are reminded of the story of David and Bathsheba, when it says, when the time comes when kings go out and fight, the men has to be out of the city, they have to go and fight, and the women come outside. Bathsheba was taking a bath, and now we can see where he was standing, and how this whole story played itself.
All right, it's down to the end of our time, so we'll go ahead and hold off right there and get ready for worship.